The views expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of Sauga 960 AM or its management.
Sauga 960 AM presents The Spin, covering the human side of sports, news, and entertainment from Mississauga, the GTA, and beyond. And now, please welcome your hosts, Barry Davis and Michelle Storino.
And it is the week of rotating hosts, and Michelle's been in for the last few days, and I am back. And Tom Forth, you are back with me again.
I am.
Great to have you here. And we've got a little bit of everything today. We will cover our sports angle, as we'll talk with former Toronto Blue Jay Dirk Hayhurst, whose story is just off the charts amazing. What he went through to make it to the big leagues, and the books he's written about it, the struggles he's had. And we'll also get his take on some of the things that are going on right now in the world of professional sports, and maybe how happy he is to no longer be involved with professional sports. So that's our sports angle. We will cover our travel angle as Jim Byers will join us. And Jim Byers is going to talk a lot about more local places where you can go. In fact, he's going to be talking about the fabulous Hazelton Hotel. You ever heard of the Hazelton Hotel?
I have not, no.
I've heard of Hazelton Lanes, but I don't know anything about the Hazelton Hotel. Also, great things to do on the Toronto waterfront. So that's really cool. And some great offers from Ottawa tourism.
I'm curious about the Ottawa one. I'm heading up there next week.
And something that you and I are both really, really jacked about talking about today.
Yep.
There is, as some of our listeners know, you and I are in a Cars tribute band called Driven. There is only one book that has ever been written about the band, and it is a biography written about former bass player Benjamin Orr. And the author of that book, Joe Milliken, is going to join us today and talk to us about the book, about the life of Benjamin Orr, who was a very quiet kind of, not someone that really had a real public lifestyle. So we'll find out some pretty fascinating things about Benjamin Orr as a musician. In fact, he was not a bass player at the beginning of his musical journey.
Yeah, guitar, I believe is what
Drums.
Drums.
He was a drummer.
Wow.
Yeah, so really cool. I actually just started reading the book last night, so I'm looking forward to talking to Joe on the show. So we have all that. We have our poll of the day. And man, oh man, are we late for our first traffic. That's coming up next here on The Spin. Here on The Spin, Barry Davis, Tom Forth, and that voice of Benjamin Orr. And we're going to talk to a gentleman now who has written a book on Benjamin Orr. In fact, it's the only book that I could find that's ever been written about any member of the Cars. Joe Milliken joins us on the line. Joe, thanks for doing this afternoon. Really great to be finally chatting with you.
Hey, how are you? Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And, it's funny. One of the things that I've noticed since Tom here and I have been in this Cars tribute band is how many people that are, quote-unquote, Cars fans that really never thought that Benjamin Orr was the singer in so many songs, because there's a lot of similarities between his voice and Rick Ocasek's voice. And they maybe knew Drive because of the video, but so many people weren't aware just how much he sang in that band.
He sang a lot of their hits, especially the first couple albums, the debut album and Candy O. Ben sang a lot of those songs. I think maybe people might not have realized it because Rick Ocasek was the songwriter of the band. And, and he was, very interesting looking visually, Rick was. In a lot of the videos, he's prominent. So I think that naturally lent people to think that Rick was the only singer. But you're right, Ben sang a lot of the hits. And yeah, I found that out too as I was writing this book. A lot of fans were contacting me saying they didn't even realize that the band had two singers.
Yeah, I was one of those. That was something that I learned actually when I started playing in the Driven, the band that we're doing now, tributing them. I had no idea, and Barry looked at me and said, "You've got to sing half the songs if you're going to be the bass player."
Well, good luck singing like Ben.
That's the thing. You know what? I'm not as pretty as him, and I can't quite sing like him either. So.
And reading your book, and I've gotten part way through the book, to know the musician that Ben was, and we know him as a great bass player and a great vocalist, but this is a guy who played the drums, he played the guitar. In your opinion, with the talent that he had, the voice that he had, and obviously the looks that he had he not hooked up with Rick and decided to just do something on his own, do you think he would have had the opportunity to become a very successful frontman for a band?
I think he would have found a way. And if somehow he didn't find a way, he would have died trying, because that's all the man ever wanted to do. He wanted to be a musician in a nationally recognized band his entire life. I don't know how far you've gotten along in the book, but he actually quit school. Yeah. He left high school as a sophomore because he wanted to become a professional musician. I know nowadays that would seem really crazy, for someone
in the 60s?
School. But I think back in the 50s and the 60s, it was it happened a little bit more, and his parents actually supported him in this decision. Ben always wanted to be a musician and be in a band. It was his only plan in life, and I think if it never happened for him as far as being a national musician or a star in a band, I think he would have died trying, because it's all he ever wanted to do. But I think because he was so well-rounded, he started as a drummer, and then, he was in the Grasshoppers when he was a teenager, and he was the rhythm guitar player. And then he eventually ended up picking up the bass when he was in the Cars. Ben was so naturally talented that whatever band he was in along the way, whatever that band needed, he just adapted his talents to what that band needed. So I think he would have found a way, or tried his entire life to find a way. And obviously, he's such an incredible vocalist and well-rounded musician that I think it would have happened either way, whether he found Rick or not.
I like that sentiment, and the talent and the drive that he had all being there. The one thing that really has stuck out to me in just a little bit of reading that I've been able to do so far is, and it really warms my heart as a musician myself, as a diehard music fan, it is really rare that you start to get into a book, and he's a pretty mercurial character. Not a lot of people even knew that he was the singer for most of the big tunes, and not an awful lot of people knew a lot about him. But the more that I'm learning now reading your book, the more that I see, like, not only is he a great musician, but he was a fantastic person. Which is, it's not something that generally you associate with success in the music industry. Like, he is, a down home, he took care of his friends. He, always was ready with backstage passes and tickets. Is there any story for yourself that sticks out in particular that really shows kind of, typifies that great personality and that friendliness that shines through in your book?
Well, there are I was told so many different stories about some of the great things that Ben did for his friends that it would be hard to pick one for you. And I interviewed, over a decade, I interviewed over 100 people who knew Ben. And, I interviewed people who went to junior high school with him, before he became famous, while he was famous, after the Cars broke up. I interviewed people who knew him through his entire life, and there was a common thread throughout all of these interviews. And whether Ben knew you when he was 15 years old, or whether it was during the peak of the Cars, or if it was after the Cars, they all said the same types of things, that he was just a great person, and he was down to earth, and he never forgot his friends. He's originally from Cleveland, the home of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. How ironic is that? And he always remembered where he came from. Whenever the Cars, were on tour, when they went through his hometown, he would always call up his friends and invite him to the show and send limos to their front door to pick them up. I've talked to his friends that even, they would go out and he would never let any of his friends spend a dime. It's just a common thread throughout. So Ben wasn't just it wasn't an act for Ben. It was naturally who he was for his entire life, before he was famous, when he was famous, and after the Cars. And it's just a common thread that I learned throughout these interviews. He was just an amazing individual. He really was.
We're in conversation with Joe Milliken. He's the author of Let's Go, Benjamin Orr, and the Cars. And, it's pretty unique and a pretty cool situation where you have two musicians in Benjamin Orr and Rick Ocasek. Rick, as you said, wrote an incredible amount of music and was willing to give a majority of those songs, or at least a big chunk of those songs, to Ben to sing. And here's Ben, who, dabbled in the songwriting, before the Cars. And you'd almost think there was a part of him going, well, I'd like to write some songs with the Cars too. But he's probably saying, well, Rick's such a great songwriter, I'll just accept that he's going to let me sing a bunch of these songs. And Rick's like, Ben's got such a great voice, I'm just going to let Ben sing. You don't often see that in a couple of musicians that are willing to kind of check their egos and do what's best for the overall sound of the band.
Yeah, you're right. It's almost like they kind of knew their place. I think Ben realized how amazing and talented a writer and a visionary that Rick was, and I think Rick realized how talented and amazing a vocalist that Ben was. And Rick would write songs for an upcoming album, and he would bring the songs into the studio. But when he wrote a song, he wasn't thinking, I'm writing this song for me. Oh, I'm going to write this song for Ben to sing. He would go into the studio with a batch of songs when the band would get together to record an album, and they would both take a crack at it.
Wow.
Here, you sing this one, I'll sing this one, and they would decide together who should have it. So he wasn't even thinking beforehand, I'm writing this with Ben in mind, or I'm writing this song with me in mind. He would bring them into the studio with an open mind, the both of them would take a crack at it, and they would both naturally realize who should be singing that song. One quote I remember from Rick, I can't remember where the quote was from, I'm sure it was in a magazine along the way, but he said that he just knew if a song really needed a serious vocal, that it was Ben's.
Yeah.
Rick had more of the quirky kind of voice, I think, and Ben was more of the smooth crooner style kind of vocalist. So even though Rick never thought beforehand who's going to sing what, there were certain times where he also said, okay, I need a serious vocal here. This is Ben's. A la Drive.
Yeah. It's really cool to think that somewhere there are archived tapes that probably have Rick singing some songs that we know that Ben sang and vice versa, which is really cool. And again, the fact that their voices had a lot of similarity, especially the low range of their voices. When it would get into the high range, you can definitely see the difference. But there was, a song on Heartbeat City, I think it was It's Not the Night, where they're both singing in it. And it was honestly until recently that I went, oh my God, that's the only Cars song that I know of where they both have lead lines in. And if you don't know it, you don't even think about it, right? You just think it's just one singer through the song. So that's really cool. I do want to get into the final interview that the Cars did as a band just prior to Ben passing away. And it was, to me, so sad to see what Benjamin Orr, who always looks so, healthy and full of life, to see him just reduced to what he was because of the cancer. How hard is that to see for you to watch that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And there's a lot of Cars groups, online and on Facebook, and a lot of fans talk about that, how they can't, they have a tough time watching that, because you're right. He was really a shell of himself at the end for that interview. But it also speaks to what kind of person he was to put that aside and go and do this interview anyway. This is how I look now. This is what I'm dealing with now, but I'm going to do this anyway. And the band had not been together in a long time. I think it was something like 14 years.
Wow.
That Rick and Ben hadn't seen each other, I'm not necessarily going to say they never talked, but they had been apart for a long time. And when Ben was diagnosed, the other guys in the band said, we have to get together and we have to do this. It is tough to see them doing that. And I've interviewed, as I mentioned, I've interviewed a couple of Ben's friends from when he was young, and a couple of them have told me that they couldn't even bring themselves to watch that interview at all. That's how much it was affecting them. One gentleman I interviewed said he started to watch it, and as soon as he saw Ben on the screen, he turned it off.
Wow.
He this is not how I want to remember him. I can't even watch this.
Joe,
it affected a lot of people, for sure.
A kind of two-part question for you. First of all, are you surprised that there are no other books on the Cars? And B, knowing that fact, any interest in doing something on Rick?
Well, there actually is a couple of books. They aren't official biographies or official books per se. There was a book that was published in the 80s called Frozen Fire, and it's now out of print, and it's really hard to find. I've seen it on eBay for a few $100s. So it's pretty rare. But there's no real official biography of the band, if you will, before my book. And there have been some fans that have actually asked me about either a book about the Cars in general or a book about Rick. And I have contemplated it. And actually, there are specific Ben fans who have been asking me. In some of my interviews, I've explained that it took me a decade to do this book, and I interviewed so many people. When I got my book deal, the publisher actually asked me to cut it back. This book was too long for them, if you will.
Yeah.
So I have a bunch of leftover interviews that I've done.
Oh, wow.
I have a whole bunch of photos that I collected. I collected from people's personal collections around 500 photos.
Oh, man.
Of Ben. And the publisher said, okay, Joe, pick 36. That's how many are going in the book. So that was almost as hard as writing the book, trying to pick out the photos I want. So I have all these leftover photos. I have all these leftover interviews. I also, after the book came out, I also had many people come to me and go, oh, my God, I knew Ben. I didn't know you were writing this book. I would have interviewed with you. So I could do more interviews, and I've actually had fans ask me about doing a companion book about Ben.
That would be
all
cool.
The leftover interviews, clips that were left out of the first book, all the photos, all these new interviews I could do. So there's actually a few options that are on the table, and I haven't actually gone back to my publisher yet to see what they might be interested in, but there are definitely a few options out there that I am going to be looking at pretty soon.
Well, listen, this was great chatting with you. We'll have to do it again sometime. And it's funny how we kind of just met, through Facebook, because this idea of the Cars tribute band was something that started when I was in high school in 1984 when Heartbeat City came out.
Wow.
And I wanted to do it, and it took me over 30 years to find the right musicians to do it, and I'm so glad we've got it going now, and I'm so glad we got a chance to meet. Even if it was over the phone. But I would love to talk some more sometime about this, because this is a fascinating topic, and you are the guy that knows about it, so it's great to catch up.
I'm so glad that we connected. I'm so glad that you invited me to talk to you today. I'm willing to talk to you anytime. And just to let people know, anybody who might be interested in the book, I have a website for the book that talks a little bit about it and gives you an idea of what it's all about.
Yep.
It's real simple. benorbook.com. People can go there and take a look, and I'd love talking to you guys, and anytime you want to talk, I'm ready.
Awesome. Sounds great. As it is with a book, with a radio show, you're limited on time, but we can definitely, we're looking at doing a music podcast somewhere down the line, so we can get a lot more in depth with you at that point.
I would love to talk to you more about it, guys. I really would. I really appreciate you inviting me on the show and allowing me to spread the word about one of the iconic singers ever in rock music, and it's an honor for me to tell Ben's story. I tell that to people all the time. I'm a real lucky guy to be able to do it, and I'm always willing to talk about it. So let's stay connected and talk again.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Joe. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks everybody.
All right,
Cheers.
there is author Joe Milliken, and I can't wait to finish reading this book because it is a really, really cool book.
Stream us live at saga960am.ca.
Substitution, that's confusion, clouds inside your head. Involving all my energies until you visited. With your eyes of poison and a blue, they shock me into sense. You think down and ask me out, you call yourself intense.
All right, had to get a little self-indulgent there. That's Driven, in our version of Bye Bye Love from the Cars.
That's my favorite car song.
Yes, I know that. And I tell you what, just talking to Joe, and you hear so much about Benjamin Orr's voice and how beautiful a voice he had. Mm-hmm. And the Rick Ocasek voice, it's quirky, it's different, and I never had any issues, and I always used to try to sing like Rick Ocasek, so I always put that on. But I really, really battle with myself in wanting to do justice with Benjamin Orr's voice when it comes to those songs.
Yep.
And it's not easy because his voice, it's challenged me in my vocal range, and it's challenged me in trying to have that sweetness and that sound that he has, because man, oh man, what an amazing voice he had.
He's really, I mean, it's kind of the story of the Cars, right? Like, you listen to it and it sounds nice, but then when you actually delve into it, there's a lot more going on. Like, yeah, he's got a great sounding voice, but until you really listen to it, you don't realize how fantastic it is.
And again, one of the really cool things that made the Cars work. First of all, neither Rick Ocasek or Benjamin Orr had successful solo careers. Rick had a moderate hit with a song called Emotion in Motion. But other than that, for a band that was so successful and is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I mean, you think the Eagles, and Don Henley had a huge solo career. Glenn Frey had a couple of big hits. The Beatles all had big solo careers. But Ben and Rick didn't have much at all when it came to their solo careers. They made their best music when they were together. And again, it was that ability to say, hey, you're a better singer than I am, so I'm going to write songs. And we were talking about this the other night. We were sitting watching some live Cars, and it's like, Rick Ocasek's the leader of this band, but he doesn't even position himself in the center of their live shows, right? It's Benjamin Orr is in the center. Rick's off to the side. And if Ben's singing a song, Rick just hangs in the back. How rare is that for a guy? Like, he's writing these songs, these hit songs, and he's like, you go ahead and sing it.
You go and do it.
You do it, because you got a better voice. And again, I don't know how good of a songwriter Benjamin Orr could have become, but he basically said, you know what? I'm just going to put that on hold, right? I mean, George Harrison did that for a certain amount of time with the Beatles and finally said, no, I'm a great songwriter myself, so I want to write songs. But Ben said, you know what? I don't know what broke them up. I'm not at that point in the book yet. But something tells me it was probably more business oriented than anything, because that's usually what happens with bands, that the business gets in the way. And also their time came, and it was, near the end of the 80s, and that sound was dying. But I tell you what, the Cars really changed the sound of rock and roll to me. When that debut album came out in 1979, no one had ever heard anything quite like that before, because it had the heavier guitars, but it had the synths, and it had the ability to dance to it. But it was different, and it was the new wave.
Yeah, that's exactly it. New wave, but the Cars did a lot more with it. Rockabilly on the guitar, a little bit of bluesy touches on the bass, right?
Totally.
The keys are total new wave at times.
A little Motownish stuff in there.
Exactly.
Right? There's just so much to them. So, I mean, if you don't know a lot about this band, check them out. But start with that debut album. Members of the band, including guitarist Elliot Easton, refers to that as their greatest hits album. Every song.
It's fantastic, cover to cover.
And I can't wait to play again. We got a virtual show that we're going to be recording soon. And that will be available in September. And there's the chance that we're going to get back out and do a few shows at the end of the summer.
Fingers crossed. It's looking good.
Yes, looking pretty good on that point. And that will do it for today's show. Tom, as always, great seeing you. Great having you.